Hello everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. The sizzling summer is definitely blockbuster season, and from Smugglers to The Moon, main tentpole movies have hit the local theaters, expecting to make big waves at the box office. Up until now, the crime action thriller Smugglers is proving popular, attracting almost 4 million moviegoers. However, other Korean movies are struggling, failing to even attract 1 million. Now, would it be right to say the South Korean film industry is struggling even after entering the endemic phase, and what should be done for a breakthrough? For an in-depth analysis, we invite Professor Jason Badgervais from Kyungdong University into the studio. Professor, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we also have film critic Piers Conran. Good to see you, Piers.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Good evening. Now, first question to our Jason. Summer is, of course, blockbuster movie season, and theaters are definitely in full swing with 4 Korean tentpole movies released. And experts say that this summer is a very important period for Korean film industry's revival. Why is this so?
Well, the summer is traditionally one of the biggest, certainly the most kind of busiest seasons of the year. Last week of July, early August, you've got the Chuseok season, the end of year season, also Lunar New Year season. These are times when the cinemas normally attract large audiences, wide demographic, young, old, and all sorts of different individuals coming into the cinema to watch films, sometimes, often as families. And the industry's been struggling to kind of stage a recovery following the pandemic. We've had the Roundup that's done very well, but a lot of films have failed to perform. And last summer was seen as a disappointment. I mean, some films did okay, The Hunt, for example, and Hansan, but Alienoid was a big box office disaster, and Emergency Declaration as well underperformed. So, all eyes were on the film industry this summer to see how well the films would do. There are a whole number of films released, Concrete Utopia, Smugglers, Ransomed, and The Moon as well. And there are also a number of films being released over the coming weeks. So it is an important time. A lot of these films have been awaiting release, and so they have to be released at some point. So they're now in cinemas, and are they performing? Some yes, some no.
Right, I see. Now, Piers, out of these 4 blockbusters, if we take out Concrete Utopia that was released just this week, up until now, Smugglers has been the most popular, having attracted more than 3.5 million moviegoers. What is so unique about the film?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to report that the film, I think, has just crossed 4 million admissions. And since that's the reported break-even point for the film, that's a very happy milestone for the production. We haven't been seeing a lot of films crossing that mark this year. And particularly as there's quite a bit of gas left in the tank, it's still in second, reservations are still okay. It's going to make a bit of money, so that's good news. Now, to be honest, I haven't seen Smugglers yet. I'm not currently in Korea. I'm very excited to watch it, but by all accounts, the film is connecting pretty well with viewers. Ryu Seung-won is a great action film director, and he has a kind of a jaunty style of cinema that has long done well on the charts, particularly films like Veteran. And Smugglers in some ways seems to kind of call back to that. Also kind of the heist films that have done really well in the Korean market, like Taja, The High Rollers and The Thieves. I think the real special selling point in Smugglers is you have this kind of big tentpole, exciting summer release, but instead of being led by male actors, which is typically the case, it's led by female actresses. So you have Kim Hye-soo and Yeom Jung-ah, and that kind of gives it a new kind of fresh tone. And as I think we'll talk during this segment, the tone, film starting to feel being a bit dated has kind of been an issue at the box office. Well, Jason, you've seen it. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Right, I see. It's good to hear that The Smugglers is doing really well, but Professor, the other 2 action drama, Ransomed, and sci-fi blockbuster The Moon failed to attract even 1 million moviegoers over the weekend. What do you think are the reasons behind this?
Well, The Moon is, I'll be frank here, it's a terrible film. In contrast to Smugglers, which is very good. And I think it's a film that may, I stress may have worked a few years ago, but certainly not anymore. It's highly dependent on melodrama, some nationalism as well, and that's really trying to drive the film. Reviews here have referred to shimpa, which is, viewers here will know what that means, but it's a form of melodrama, very exaggerated emotions. And the film is just so uneven, it's sloppy, it's just, it tries to kind of replicate the success of Gravity and The Martian and other films have actually performed well here in Korea, but it just fails miserably. Ransomed is a much better film, but I think what they both share in common, though, these are films that, have done well in the Korean box office, a kind of heavy dose of melodrama, focus on these A-list actors and local themes, nationalism, but the problem is I think audiences now are seeking something different, and I think it's quite telling. The two films that are performing in the Korean box office this summer, Milsu, or Smugglers in English, and there's also Concrete Utopia. They're, I would argue, quite different blockbusters. Smugglers is a female-led film, just incredible, was certainly very interesting visuals, so aesthetically very pleasing, and the director, Yoo Sung-won, takes audiences in very kind of surprising directions, and Concrete Utopia is a very dark film, very bleak, and it's unafraid to kind of leave audiences with a kind of bad taste in their mouth. So, and I think that's resonating at the moment, I think part because of the streaming platforms and the content they're producing, and a film like Concrete Utopia, I think, does share some similarities to the dystopian fare that we see on Netflix. So I think the industry's changing.
Right, I see. Interesting. Now, Pierce, let's talk about the last one among a big four, like we have discussed earlier. Dystopian black comedy Concrete Utopia was released just Wednesday, and it reportedly offers a completely different narrative from the disaster films we have seen so far. Is it really so?
Well, first of all, I will say that this one I have seen, thankfully, and Jason, I agree with what you said, absolutely. Now, Concrete Utopia is a Korean disaster film. The disaster film is a very common genre in the market. It's worked very well in the past. Films like Haeundae or The Tower, Ashfall, plenty more. But rather than do the same thing again, Concrete Utopia does offer something quite new. It has kind of a unique and thrilling twist on the genre and turns it into a very compelling metaphor that particularly Korean viewers really kind of see their own situations in. So rather, compared to other disaster films, this one sort of begins with the disaster having just happened, and so it's the aftermath. It's kind of the dystopia that this earthquake that rattles Seoul creates, and there's a residential block that's left standing for how many miles by itself, and the residents of it kind of are trying to battle against outsiders and eventually against themselves, so they can keep what is theirs. They fought so hard to get for themselves as they were trying to climb up in society. So it's a very dark metaphor for Korean real estate and social class. It's really, really effective. It's very well made. There's some wonderful performances. I adore Lee Byung-hun in the film. He has a very, very kind of twisted and amusing performance, and he's had so many great performances in his career. This one stands out pretty well. So, and as Jason, you mentioned, it is very dark. It's a very cutting commentary. It's quite dark, but I think the darkness kind of makes it connect more strongly, because the darkness kind of reflects certain issues that are in Korea. So I've loved it, and I hope that Korean audiences are responding to it as well. It's off to a pretty decent start, I think.
Right, listening to what Pierce said, I'd like to watch it myself if I have a chance. Now, Jason, let's talk about the movies that are soon to hit the theaters right now. Many of the films, including horror movies like Jason Yu's horror thriller Sleep, which premiered at Cannes Critics Week, are set to release. Now, what film are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, I'm still looking forward to Sleep. I mean, this is Jason Yu's featured directorial debut, like you said. I mean, Jason Yu's worked with Bong Joon-ho as an assistant, so I'm quite keen to see that. It stars Lee Sung-kyun, who is in Parasite, and Jung Yoo-mi, so two great actors. There's A Man of Reason as well, directed and starring Jung Woo-son. So that's premiered at the Toronto Film Festival last year. It's taken a year for it to get to audiences here. So I'm curious to see how well that does. I wasn't able to make the screening, unfortunately, so I haven't seen that yet. There's also Honey Sweet, which is a romantic comedy. This is a genre I'm actually quite keen on in Korea. I think they're very interesting the way they convey the culture, and this focuses on a character played by Yoo Hae-jin, and it's directed by Lee Han, who brought us Punch. So there are a few films. In fact, there's probably too many films coming out, and I worry a little bit that it's getting somewhat congested, and so it's going to be very difficult for these films to make money. There's also Kim Ji-yoon's Cobweb that comes out for Chuseok, which is at the end of September. So that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, follows a director in the 1970s, and Kim Ji-yoon is a director I've long admired. So I'm very excited to see that, and I hear there are some kind of correlations, put it that way, to the director of Kim Ki-young, who is a very famous filmmaker in the 1960s and 70s. He brought us films such as The Housemaid, so I'm keen to watch that.
Right, a lot to look forward to. Now, Piers, though we'll have to wait and see how these movies perform at the box office, and whether Smugglers will, it has already surpassed its break-even point, but up until now, the roundup, No Way Out, is the only Korean film released this year to more than break even, but that was just before I learned that the Smugglers surpassed the break-even point. Now, but since we are seeing some of the struggling films here, could we say the Korean film industry is in a dire situation?
I'm sorry to say that is probably a fair summation of the current situation. The industry was obviously severely affected by the pandemic, and it's never really returned from that. We're looking at box office around the world, the Barbenheimer phenomenon kicking off and doing so well in a lot of markets. Korea just continues to struggle, and we can't really blame COVID anymore. So, what are the issues? And the industry has kind of, start looking inward and thinking, what are the internal problems causing this? I mean, it's not just Korean films. The imports are not doing as well as they have in the past either, but it's definitely affecting Korean films more. And some people were optimistic that this summer would be, hopefully, would be finally the return. That hasn't been the case. We were hoping last summer would be the return. There were some catastrophic failures last year. Jason, you've already mentioned a few of those, like Alienoid and Emergency Declaration, like really some of the most expensive failures in the Korean film history. And sadly, the films that are not performing well this summer are doing even more poorly. So that's The Moon and Ransomed, both very expensive films, and they're not going to come anywhere close to recouping their investments. So that's not good. And there haven't been a lot of films released even. I mean, after the roundup, there was The Child, and then there was The Smugglers. So like in a 2-month period, they released one film in the middle. Last year, there were films like The Witch 2 and Decision to Leave, which did have some audiences. So there's really a problem there. It's great that Smugglers has gone over its break-even point. And I hope it keeps going up to kind of make up for the losses of the other films. But it's only the second film of the year to go over its break-even point. It's a completely untenable situation. Investors have been skittish for a few years now. There are all these films there's this backlog of unreleased films, and you're releasing films into a market where you're pretty sure they're not going to make any money. And so how do you justify investing in new films? It's a pretty scary situation. I do think that at some point it'll solve itself, but right now it looks pretty dark.
Right, I see. Now, Jason, what should be done for the stagnant South Korean film industry to, see a turning point?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. It is pretty bleak, as Piers stated. I mean, I think if there is some cause for optimism is that this summer we're seeing original films doing well. The thing is, last year it was all sequels, and yes, we do have the roundup that did well this year, but we're actually seeing a lot of original films doing well, including American films. Elemental, for example, that's doing really well in the Korean market, and some Japanese animations as well. So I hope that we see original films rather than sequels continue to perform in the box office. And I think, the success, hopefully, I hope I haven't tempted fate here, of Concrete Utopia, it's got off to a good start. Hopefully it can continue doing well over the coming weeks. Netizen reactions seem pretty strong. So that would suggest to me, at least, that there is an appetite to watch original films, films that, they rather see in the cinema rather than just waiting for streaming platforms. The streaming era has certainly changed the industry. There's no doubt about that. I think we're in a different phase now. I think this summer, if there is a further confirmation of that, and it's interesting, like I said earlier, how you've got a film that's kind of certainly been influenced by some of the content that we see on the streaming services, chiefly Netflix. So I do think the Korean film industry is resilient. It's proved to be resilient over the years. We've seen some pretty dark times. It entered a recession in the late 2000s, and it was able to bounce back. So hopefully the same will be true here. But as we've been saying, it's certainly quite bleak right now.
Right. Well, Piers, what's your opinion on this? I mean, what should be done to revive this industry?
I agree with everything that Jason's brought up. And if I were to add to that, one of the big some of the challenges we're seeing are the way that ticket prices were raised very quickly in the market. Lower ticket prices would be nice, perhaps, to get audiences coming back into theaters, but that's probably an unrealistic thing to hope for. I think a big problem has been the budgets of the films that have been escalating for a long time. And you're looking like this summer, the two big films this summer that are really underperforming are the most expensive ones. And the films that have been doing really well this year and last year, the roundup movies, those are relatively cheap films to make. And so Smugglers, currently the most successful film of the summer, is also the cheapest. So our audience is looking for big, effects-driven local films. I don't really think so. I think they want to see their Hollywood movies with their big effects budgets, and they want something different from the Korean market. And so I would like to think that this series of failures of big budget movies of Korean companies trying to ape like a Hollywood style film, the Moon, as Jason you mentioned, like it's like The Martian, it's like Gravity, it's trying to copy a Hollywood movie. Alienoid, a film I actually quite enjoyed, really didn't work, and it felt like it was trying to copy Marvel. Let Marvel do Marvel and let Korea do its own thing. So and I think that comes with lower budgets, for lower risk, and they lead to more original films. So we'll see. I hope the industry will kind of take a lesson from what kinds of films are particularly not doing well in the market at the moment.
Right. I hope South Korean films could see some momentum to revive the industry. Well, let's turn our eyes to foreign movies now. Professor, while Barbie continues to achieve box office successes around the world, ironically, it is struggling very much in South Korea. And some say a reluctance to embrace this feminist-themed, movie is one of the reasons. What's your view on this?
That's definitely possibly part of the reason why it failed, but it's certainly not the only reason, in my opinion. I think Korea is a unique market. I mean, we've seen Elemental perform very well in Korea. It didn't do very well in the West, certainly America. And some films have performed well here and not elsewhere, and vice versa. And I mean, Barbie is a film that, yes, deals with feminist themes, and films that have done that in the past in Korea. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them have struggled. We saw Phantom earlier this year that didn't do very well, great female cast. And, some, anti-feminists bash the film online. But, Barbie is a film that's entrenched in popular American culture and films like Star Wars, for example, have not performed here either, at least to the extent that they have in the United States. So, you know, I think there are a variety of reasons why it hasn't performed well here in Korea. And, you know, if you look at the success of Smugglers, which is a female-driven film, a Korean film, that's doing really well.
Right.
So I don't think, I think when people say, yeah, it's just because it deals with feminist themes, that's the reason why it's not doing very well in Korea. It might be part of the reason, but it's not the full reason.
Right, this just popped out in my mind. So in that case, what do you think is most popular in South Korean market? I mean, what do you think Korean moviegoers like the best to see from the movies?
Well, I think story is chief among them. I was very lucky to meet Bong Joon-ho. I interviewed him several times, and years ago when I was talking to him about Utopia, so I asked him about the movie and whether it would do well in cinemas, and he said to me that the most important thing for the Korean audience is the story. Story. Yeah. So I think if the story is there, then and the story is good and it's interesting, and it resonates with audiences here. Now, a Korean film will deal with various social issues. We've seen that with Concrete Utopia, and it's focused on the apartment, and it's a really interesting metaphor, as Piers rightly mentioned. And I think it connects with an audience. Yes, there's spectacle, but I think it works chiefly because of the story and its approach to it. And so I think if the story is right, it can work here. So yes, it has to be well made, but the story, for me, in my opinion, is very important indeed. All
right. Story is the key. All right, well, Piers, I believe this would be our last question. So Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is opening in theaters next week, and expectations are already really high. What do you expect?
Well, certainly, yeah, pre-sales are completely through the roof, and already IMAX screenings are sold out for weeks, which is kind of a phenomenon we've been seeing around the world. So it's clearly going to open very well, and the question is, how is it going to connect with local viewers, and will it keep growing, and will it kind of reach out to a larger audience? We'll have to see, because it is, of course, a 3-hour movie. It's a period biography picture. It's not an action film or anything like that. It's kind of an unusual title to have to release during summer, but the reason it is released is because of the name behind it, Christopher Nolan, who is a gigantic, he's just a box office behemoth, and he's particularly popular in Korea. So there's no doubt it's going to do rather well. Will it reach the heights of films of his, such as Interstellar? Perhaps not, because Interstellar had worked particularly well in Korea because of its emotional, its touching emotional elements. And Oppenheimer doesn't really have that. But at the same time, Oppenheimer is overperforming completely across the world, and so it's kind of a rather unique phenomenon. So I really wouldn't bet against it. And the question really is, will it do well enough to be the biggest film of the summer in Korea? Currently, that is Elemental, which will at some point soon cross the 7 million admissions mark. So that is kind of the bar for Oppenheimer to beat at this point, and I wouldn't really bet against it. But at the very least, I'm quite sure that IMAX screenings will be booked for quite some time to come. So if you can get a ticket, I would snap it up pretty quickly.
All right, I see. Something to look forward to. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Well, thank you, Piers, for your time and insights.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, Professor Petrovich, for your time and insights as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend, and goodbye.